What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of At a Glance, a series in which I give you an appetizer sampler glimpse into a particular faction of 40k, and the goal is to help you decide if you want to look further into them yourself or even potentially collect them. So, up on the chopping block this time is another viewer request, which is very cool, and this is the Exorcist Space Marines chapter, a loyalist Space Marine chapter from the 13th Founding, called the Dark Founding. Now, I'm a big fan of the Exorcists, so it's cool to see them requested, and what we have here is a highly unorthodox chapter in terms of creation. I would say they're one of the more unique chapters out there, if not one of the most unique. So, they started off as an Ordo Malleus experiment, and the idea was to help the Ordo Malleus combat the demon, have a force that specializes in doing that aside from just the Grey Knights. So what they did, and it's thought, they took Grey Knight Gene Seed and made a successor chapter to the Grey Knights, called the Exorcists. It's unofficially official in their fluff, it's a rumored thing, it's thought that is what happened, so essentially they are the only successor of Grey Knights, and utilize Grey Knight Gene Seed, which came direct from the Emperor himself. So that's a really strong lineage when you think about it. And that might be why this process works. And the process that they did is that they created Space Marines, but had them temporarily possessed by a lesser demonic entity, and then had an Inquisitor banish the demon from the Space Marine's body. And those that survived the process were hardened to the warp. That was the thought process. And therefore could be more effective at fighting against the warp and fighting on the hellish battlefields of demon worlds and whatnot, in which senses can be betrayed and you can get corrupted from overexposure. They wouldn't be able to because of their temporary possession. So that was the theory, and they decided to test it by making 2 companies of Space Marines just like this. And they sicked them loose upon a planet with a heavy demonic incursion on it, and they sat in space with a Grey Knight strike force just in case it didn't work out. But it actually turned out to be a great success. They got a high kill ratio, and it worked very well for combating the demon and the warp. And thus the Exorcists were born. So they are a Codex Astartes Space Marine chapter. They're not equipped like Grey Knights. That much needs to be stated and understood. While they are essentially the only successor to Grey Knights, they are not equipped the same way. So they're equipped and organized like a standard Space Marine chapter, but because of their highly unorthodox and high mortality rate, in the unorthodox way of making Space Marines, they have 2 extra scout companies. So having a total of 12 companies is also unorthodox, but all this unorthodox stuff is needed because of the way in which an Exorcist Space Marine becomes a Space Marine and gets possessed. So they need the extra recruits. Those that don't survive the process are killed, obviously. Whether they die in the process or are wholly given over to the demon, whatever happens, they get killed. Otherwise, they fight against the demon for a little bit, strength of will to stay alive and survive. And then once the demon is banished, they may undergo some reconstructive surgery if necessary, and then, they're an Exorcist Space Marine. So the Exorcists are trained and equipped like regular Space Marines, as well as receiving additional training against the demon. The Grey Knights train a certain way to combat the demon, and the Exorcists have similar training to the Grey Knights in certain respects. So that's pretty cool. They have an understanding, even down to the basic Battle Brother, of utilizing hexagrammic wards and knowledge of demons and how to banish them and of the warp and everything. The Exorcists, like the Grey Knights, are basically combining dark and light magic together, for lack of a better way of explaining it, in what they do. And this is shown really strongly in how the Exorcists fight. They are calm outside of battle, but in battle they have a heightened aggression, but they're still intelligent, they're not feral, and what they do is they adapt on the fly and change their tactics quickly in an organized intellectual manner to try and confuse the opponent by doing something, then rapidly and radically changing their tactics midway through. But all the while they chant. They chant in a series of dark languages, as well as chanting litanies in High Gothic together in one fluid chant. And it's very unsettling, and it's a real kind of example of the light and the dark kind of mixed together in a sense when you think about it. I know it's not literally that, but it's the best way I can describe it. So, their homeworld is called Banish. It's in a quarantine sector of space. On their homeworld is some Automalius facilities that are under the protection of the Exorcists. So the Exorcists are a fully functional autonomous chapter, but they maintain very close ties with the Automalius, as you would expect considering their founding. So with that said, they have some subcults within their chapter, as for lack of a better term, a club, you could say, that you have to meet certain prerequisites to be a part of, and you can be a part of multiple of these subcults, which are called orisons. And each one maintains their own knowledge, essentially, to pass on to members. So on top of the training they get as a chapter, if you become part of certain orisons, which is considered a great honor, you get additional knowledge, which is interesting. One of these orisons is called the Enochian Guard. Now the Enochian Guard is pretty prominent because it's made up only of First Company veterans, and only First Company veterans who have personally slain a manifested demon in single combat. So it's kind of an exclusive club in that regards. We know of two other orisons by name. One of them is the Obelisk Thelamus, and many of the Exorcist Devastators and Tech Marines belong to it, for whatever reason. And then the third one we know is the Broken Tower. And the Broken Tower is comprised almost exclusively of members of the chapter's librarium. And the chapter has a particularly powerful librarian, as you would come to expect. They're combating the warp, and even the librarians were temporarily possessed and everything, so you could suspect that they would have a pretty powerful librarian because of that fact, and they do. So that's also pretty interesting, combined with the fact that they know of the arcane ruins and hexagrammic ward knowledge and banishment of the demon and all that, leads to a chapter that is pretty unique in my opinion. 12 companies, because of their unique way in which a Space Marine is made essentially into an exorcist. So I just like the whole narrative and everything. I find it very unique. Now, this chapter is one that does fight against mundane targets, but you can imagine probably gets frequently used by the Automalius when necessary, because Grey Knights are such a precious resource that you want them at the most dangerous stuff. But it doesn't mean there's one really dangerous thing and nothing else. There's usually one really dangerous thing and numerous minor things that could use Grey Knight attention, and in that case, Exorcist attention will work just fine. So that's pretty cool. Color scheme. Their original color scheme you saw in the beginning is terrible. That yellow with the purple and the shoulder pad trim that was checkered pattern, and the black backpack color, and the black triangle on the helmet's mouth area of the armor. It was just silly, complicated, and too much was going on. But that was their original color scheme from back in the day, and I don't know how long they have been in this current color scheme, but it has to have been a while, because I've seen this current color scheme for the Exorcist for a long, long time. So there's that. And I like this color scheme a lot better than their original one. So their color scheme now is this nice red armor. It's somewhere between Blood Raven's red and Blood Angel's red. It's like in between the two. And they have black backpacks still. Kind of, you could say maybe a nod of the head to their old original color scheme. Although occasionally you'll see some red backpacks, but really they have black backpacks, the red armor, black shoulder pad trim, but you'll see some GW art in which the shoulder pad trim is company colored. But with the Forge World art is black shoulder pad trim. And you'll notice that their chest emblem is bronze. They make use of the white helmet and the white shoulder pad trim for First Company and for veterans. And their Terminators have black shoulder pads, bronze helmet, and silver-white type of chest emblem. So it's just a nice visual force. It's nothing too complicated or crazy, but it's not something that's just one color and that's it. Their weaponry is either black or red. I've seen it in art as both, so it's up to you there. Plus, you have the capability, if you want to, either by trying to find, which do exist, decal sheets of arcane symbols which are out there, or by freehanding, you can put arcane ruins and hexagrammic ward symbols on the armor of your Space Marines. You could also make use of the orisons and make up symbols that are for those, plus make up your own orison. So for example, the broken tower, if you're going to play with a librarian, you can put a broken tower symbol of your creation, essentially, maybe a crumbling tower, on like the leg armor or something, just to denote that this librarian is a member of the broken tower. It doesn't do anything except look cool. So lots of potential for some customization on your Exorcist Space Marines to really have them stand out, which I find pretty nice. So with that said, when it comes to collecting them, you're going to need the Space Marine Codex. Forge World has the Exorcists in the Badab War Part 2 book, so if you really want to get a decent read on them, which is not everything, but it's nice extra stuff on them, that's the book I recommend. You'll see a special character in there. There's no model for them. You have to make them up yourself, and you can do that and then run them as a basic captain or something in games where Forge World stuff isn't allowed, like in most tournaments and leagues and whatnot. So you can do that if you wanted to, or make up your own HQ completely. It doesn't matter. Forge World does state they have PDFs. They have 2 PDFs. An updated special character PDF out there, which is for the Space Marine Badab characters, and then they have Forge World Space Marine Chapter Tactics, and that's out there for the chapters that they had heavy involvement in. So it's not going to be the ones that have stuff from GW, but the ones that they've done heavily, such as Red Scorpions, Carcharodons, and so on. And one of those is the Exorcists, but the way they list it here is that it's the players choosing from the regular Space Marine Codex what chapter tactic you apply to them. So that represents their playstyle a bit, how it's really open-ended and can fit anybody's playstyle. So any of the chapter tactics, including the Black Templar's chapter tactic, can work for you. In that case, you just wouldn't be able to field librarians. But if you weren't planning on fielding librarians anyway, and you liked the benefits of the Black Templar's chapter tactics, well then, there you go. Might as well use them if you want to. But what I really recommend is the Ultramarines chapter tactics. What you get for the chapter tactics are pretty cool and work well for the Exorcists. But on top of that, if you wanted a special character counts as in your force, I feel Sicarius and Tigerius are the best for special character counts as that work well in terms of Exorcists. So I think they would work really well in that manner, and that's why I recommend the Ultramarines chapter tactics specifically. When it comes to collecting them, the basic GW kits work very well from GW and from Forge World. Painting them up, like I said, their color scheme is pretty cool, but because of their demonic possession they go through, and then having it banished and undergoing reconstructive surgery, because they're not left with any vestigial horns or anything. If that happens, those horns and the like would be removed via reconstructive surgery. But because of their unique creation, a lot of Space Marines are scarred. So if you're going to do unhelmeted Space Marines and you want to practice or do scarred facial features and scarred tissue and scarred flesh and all that stuff, this is a good chapter in which that would be very appropriate to do. And it would be a nice chapter to learn it and then apply it, because you can put it on every Space Marine that is unhelmeted if you wanted to. So with that said, that's basically it. Thanks for sticking through it. The Exorcists are pretty cool. There's lots to discuss, and I only try to keep it at a glimpse standpoint. So definitely a chapter that's interesting to look into if you find them interesting at all, from what I said here. And with that said, that's basically it. So thanks for sticking through it. If you have any questions or comments or requests of your own, leave them in the comments section. I'm always open to taking requests, and will do my best to fulfill them if possible. So with that, that's it. So until next time, take it easy.